Whoa. Man, have I burned the candle at both ends today. I'll tell you what, tattooed monkey is tired. I'm never too tired to talk about metaphysics, though. I love it. I like the fact that I'd be the first person on YouTube to talk about this topic. And there's not a lot of information to go on, but there's more than enough, especially if you can engage the dialectic and do some retroduction. Actually, good induction and deduction a la Sherlock Holmes is about all you need. That and a decent understanding of the connection between ancient Greece and India. So let's go over that first, but we're talking about the teacher of Plotinus, and that is Ammonius Saccas. And that's kind of a slight perversion of Ammonius Saccas, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. But first, I don't know if you're familiar with King Ashoka, but the oldest writings in India, the oldest, are in Brahmi Prakrit. By the way, I can translate Brahmi Prakrit, translate Pali Prakrit, which is also a Prakrit. The oldest writings are the edicts of King Ashoka, but the earliest ones are the rock edicts, before the pillar edicts. Like the Kandahar bilingual rock edict is a famous bilingual edict in both Greek and Aramaic, and it's in current-day Afghanistan, but then was in the Indus, upper northwest Magadha Valley. Is actually quite far northwest Magadha Valley area, put up by King Ashoka, and roughly about 280 BCE. And another thing, too, there was a lot of communication and travel and exchange of philosophical ideas, because that, back in the day, like today, that type of stuff doesn't exist, but kind of a crude analogy we'd have would be movies. Like the biggest export America has is its action movies and stuff, and the whole world consumes it. Even if they like or don't like America, they love watching American movies. And back then, that analogy was true philosophy, really good, something that made you, uplifted your spirit and made you think. I mean, it was part of living a full life. We don't have that anymore, but back then, there's food that you stuff your pie hole with that makes you fatter and keeps you alive. But there's another kind of food that Americans, really the world, is not into. And I'm into big time. Of course, I stuff my pie hole a lot too. Yay, fat belly. Of consuming stuff that would make your mind grow. And so the Greeks and Indians had a huge exchange on, I think it's the 13th Pillar Edict, is it? And it's in reference to the ancient Egyptian king Ptolemy II of Philadelphus, who lived in 309 BCE to 246 BC. Anyway, in India it's written, now it's by conquest of Dhamma, the beloved servant of the gods. I think it's Piyadasi. Beloved of the gods, considered to be the most conquest. Here in Voyas, King Antiochus rules beyond where which the foreign king named Ptolemy, and Alexander rule likewise. Of course, we know Alexander the Great made his way into India. That's where we get the word Khandas from, but that's a matter of another discussion. Anyway, that's Rock Edict 13, mentioning that the Dhamma, King Ashoka was a convert to original Buddhism. I emphasize the word original. And he mentions that King Ptolemy II, of ancient Egyptian ruler, was very familiar with and observing Buddhist principles. And there's no other YouTube videos about that fact. I mean, that's really, people think, well, Egypt was way over here and it didn't have any connection with stuff. No, there was a lot of trade, also too trade of ideas, because that is its own gold and currency itself. Anyway, getting back to Plotinus, his teacher was Ammonius Saccas, and Plotinus's disciple Porphyry mentions that he despised the views, Ammonius Saccas, Plotinus's teacher, his master's teacher, despised the views of the majority, which were a disgrace to philosophy from his position. Also, too, according to Porphyry, the parents of Ammonius Saccas were Christians, but upon learning Greek philosophy, Ammonius rejected his parents' religion in exchange for paganism is really an incorrect word. With paganism today, we think of like New Age stuff and witches and stuff. Paganism, of course, has a completely different denotation in reference to that area. I have no love for current New Age movement, but that's when we say pagan today, that's what we think of. We think of like the New Age occult section in the bookstore, but this is completely different if you did not know that. By the way, in reference to original Buddhism, people think Sakyamuni Buddha, I translate Pali by the way, Sakyamuni Buddha is a name. It's not a name at all, it's an appellation. Buddha is not a person, it never is in doctrine, that's not my position. Buddha is Akim Kana, it is literally a spiritual entity. It's not a physical, flesh and blood thing. When someone makes reference to a Tathagata, which means having arrived at the Absolute, or Brahman, Tat Agata as past tense means you've arrived at the Absolute. But Sakyamuni literally means the Scythian sage. Sakya is Pali or Prakrit for Scythian. I don't know if you know what the Scythians are. Muni just means sage or teacher. So let's connect the dots here. Plotinus' teacher, okay, he gave him the appellation, it's not a name, of Ammonius Saccas. Ammonius means teacher, yeah, Ammonas, teacher. It also can mean the hidden one, but that's probably not applicable. Teacher or builder, in other words, guru or master. So Ammonius Saccas, okay, you wait for it here, means Scythian sage or teacher. That's the only thing Sakyamuni Buddha. Ammonius Saccas, let's just pause for a second here. Ammonius Saccas means Scythian teacher. And that's exactly what Sakyamuni Buddha means. Sakyamuni means Scythian sage. Sakya Muni, Scythian sage. And Buddha is, of course, not a person at all. It's in reference to one of spiritual attainment, transcendence, disobjectification. Someone that is living yet has died to the psychophysical, i.e. the corporeal body. So they both mean the same thing. We could contend and back and forth and debate and harangue each other over that being the case, but I mean, I know it is the case. Ammonius Saccas, the teacher of Plotinus, means Scythian sage or teacher or guru. If you don't know who the Scythians are, you can do a nice Google search on the Scythians. They're steppe people. The Indians called them the snake-legged people because they wore pants, that went down each leg. And that was, something completely foreign to the people of that period. That's why they call them snake-legged people, because they, wore pant on each leg. They're great horsemen. And, by the way, also too, ancient India, of course, India didn't exist back then, but several rivers dump into northern India. In the last ice age, it is undeniable that many people of the Volga River and current-day Finland and upper Germanic Scandinavia came down and settled into India. The principal character, by the way, and this is the time when King Ptolemy was observing, around this whole 500-year, 600-year epoch of time, being observed by King Ptolemy II of ancient Egypt. The principal character in the oldest Upanishad, which is the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, you tell me if this sounds like Scandinavian or not. The principal character's name is Yajnavalkya. Look it up if you don't believe me. It's in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Principal character's name, yes, is Yajnavalkya. Scythian/Germanic Scandinavia? Yes, those people came down in the last ice age. They did. They escaped the freezing weather. They came down those rivers in their boats, and they settled in what is today northern India. Of course, India didn't exist back then. Neither did Scandinavia. But there were Scythians. There's some debate on where the Scythians are from, but not really. I'm not interested in debating where they're from or that, but we know generally where they're from. But Sakyamuni means Scythian sage, and Plotinus' teacher, Ammonius Saccas, It means Scythian teacher or guru. Muni means closer to guru than Ammonius. But the world wasn't that big back then. We think, this culture was over here and this one was over here and they never interacted. It's just total bunk. It's just totally not true. Trade routes existed, and though it doesn't exist today, once again, I have to be very emphatic to the fact that, people traded in food and gold and jewels and shiny stones and rocks and stuff. But something else that was its own currency that fed the soul and the mind was ideas. We do that today via email, and people write books and they sell them on Amazon or whatever. They did the same thing back then. It didn't weigh anything. Whether you wrote it on paper or you spread it via word of mouth, people gobbled that stuff up. They wanted to know enlightening things that were spiritually uplifting and fulfilling. And that was its own trade item. All these people that talk about the Silk Road and what was traded back and forth between countries, isn't that great? But the most important thing to the ancient people was not really all those baubles and gold and silver and salt and everything. It was ideas. That's why in the 3rd century BC, King Ashoka put an inscription in both Greek and Aramaic. Also, too, why he put on another edict that the teachings of original Dhamma, of the original Buddhism, of course, the word Buddhism didn't exist until many, many countless centuries later, was being observed by the king of ancient Egypt, King Ptolemus II. If that doesn't tell you something, then you're not very smart. Most of you don't know that. Of course, none of us were taught this stuff in school. It's like, wouldn't that be fascinating? Like, hey, did you know that it's written in one of the oldest known writings in India, and it's completely verified, of course, this King Ashoka edict saying, hey, the teachings of original Buddhism, which King Ashoka was a convert to, was being observed in ancient Egypt by King Ptolemus II. Whoa, really? That's pretty profound. So, and yes, Plotinus' teacher, Ammonius Saccas, is the Scythian sage or guru. Ammonius Saccas' ultimate connection to ancient India area is up for not a whole lot of debate. It's highly probable. We can't speculate that far, but all indications are yes. So, anyway, something to think about. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and goodbye.